Now, who are you? You're always on Channel 9. This is the third time for you. You're the first three-bagger, I think. Yeah.
Actually, fourth.
You've been on.
I was on the very first day. Remember Alan Greiber and I? You did that little thing about transparency and about that. That was just wasn't much.
So who are
no
you?
demos. I'm Ken Levy.
Yeah.
I'm the Visual Studio Data Product Manager, which covers Visual FoxPro and sponsoring the XML tools in Visual Studio 2005.
And Visual FoxPro, you guys just today put out a roadmap. So what's that roadmap about?
Roadmap is detailing how we're going to enhance FoxPro for the next few years and focusing on a project code named Sedna, which is really taking...
Now, where did you get that code name from?
The code name, we had Europa for FoxPro 9, which was the moon around Jupiter, which I got from the idea of 2010. There was a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so we were thinking planets and different things, and then I thought, we researched these different masses that are past Pluto, the 9th planet, as in past 9, and it's a possible 10th planet, essentially. So it seemed like a cool thing.
Very
Something
cool.
After the 9th planet.
All right, so...
Not much more reason than that.
How do you say it again?
Sedna.
Sedna. So
Yeah.
Sedna.
Sedna is about taking Visual FoxPro and making it run great on Longhorn, interop with the .NET Framework 2.0, have it as a great complementary tool for Visual Studio 2005, and work even better with Yukon, since over half the Fox developers use SQL Server as their database with FoxPro. So we have lots of ideas. We're just starting in development now. I think what you'll see in the demos that I have lined up to show you here will give you kind of a sneak preview of the things we're trying to do, and this is just touching the surface.
Okay.
What we want to do is make the things you see here more powerful, easier to use. So
you got demos?
Yeah.
I love demos.
So
all right.
There's not a magic coherence to the demos I'm going to show you, but there is a section of demos where it all will make sense. It'll tie together. But there's a couple of features that I want to show just to start off. And
so you're running what, in virtual PC here? Or?
This one is not.
Okay.
Okay. And this one I'm going to show you here is something that's a developer using Visual FoxPro 9 will understand.
Okay.
It's a quick demo, and what we did. Do you want to try doing it here?
Sure.
That might work.
All right.
So what we do in the report writer, the report system in FoxPro 9, is not only to add a lot of new features to creating reports and allowing you to run FoxPro code while the report runs, and to have designer hooks so people can tap in. The next step is how do you surface things that require code to make them a lot easier. So let's look at this particular report here. And I'm going to go into the command window and say set report behavior to 8.0. And I just want to show you what you would normally get just by hitting preview. You run this report and you have your standard, label and items. Pretty bland, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, if I wasn't using the new features that I'm about to show you, even in 9.0 the report would look similar. Well, you can rotate labels and change colors of bands at runtime, but it requires code. What we did here is allow you to go into the properties, and what we did is allow new components to be added to the page frames on here. So if you look at FoxPro 9, you won't see this option here. Okay. This is something new we've added as an extension. And we're saying, okay, rotate minus 45 degrees, and take a look at this item here. This was not in there before, where you can actually click on this guy and say, I want it to be bold if this expression is true for this item. So every time the ship via is equal to code 3, make it bold. If it's equal to 2, make it italic.
Okay.
And one more example would be this guy, and we have dynamic coloring. And this would be common in a report. If the date is past this, certain value, then make it red. Otherwise, make it blue.
Yep.
And we have other extensions like we can come in here and say properties, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're working on a new tab. We're like turn off the thermometer bar and all things that we added hooks for that require code. So all those things you just saw would require a fair amount of code, even with FoxPro 9. So I hit preview. Okay, and what happens is it hooks together all these extensions. It rotates your label, changes the color. I didn't have to write any code to do all this.
Now, in the current version, you'd have to write code to do this.
Yeah, the current version is cool because you can do all this stuff where you couldn't even do it before.
Wow.
Now what we've done is we added custom builders with classes that basically write metadata to the report file, and then there's these listener objects that automatically generate the right code and run things for you. And so it all ties together, and now you can just go in, make some settings, hit run, and they're generic.
Now you're channelizing a lot of people here, right?
In this particular demo?
Yeah, because they're not going to be able to use this stuff for, a year, 2 years.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
What we plan to do is, even though setting is planned for early 2007,
okay.
what we plan to do is have like regular public betas.
Okay.
And we want certain components to be in really good shape so we can allow deployment of them even before Sedna ships.
Okay.
So we expect people to be using something like this feature even earlier.
Oh, cool.
Let me close this out. No relation to this feature. If we just clear all here. Have you seen demos of VB 2005 and upcoming would be where you use MyDot to simplify things?
Yeah.
All right. So you'll be familiar with this. So if I go into this program here, just a blank program, and we are working on our own My for FoxPro.
Ooh.
Okay? So we
I
say My.
I heard we're getting rid of the My word in the...
Well, remember, that is just for items and folders and stuff. It has nothing to do with, like, programming. So maybe we had to make room for My and VB and Fox and get rid of it in the Start menu so it's not confusing.
Right.
It's not about My documents, it's about, My object.
Yeah.
So
you can have my object, but not my documents anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
So if I say My dot, notice, and this is only a few weeks old. We just started prototyping this, and you could say something like user.computername, and I'll just hit run.
I should explain the inside joke there.
Yes.
In Longhorn, the names of your items on your desktop are not going to have...
right, my pictures, my videos. Yeah, I'll just say
videos.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe so many people will be using VB and my that they didn't want people to get confused with Longhorn.
Yep.
So actually, if we clear that out, so you got the demo, right?
Yeah.
We've got this my functionality. But what we can do is actually extend this. So what I did, just for fun, earlier today, is this is the class browser tool. It's a utility I wrote in the FoxPro 3.0. It's been around. And notice there's these classes, and what you can do is subclass your own. Let me show you. I created one called Multimedia, and its idea is say my.multimedia. Then I created one called Images, and I added a method here for resizing. And it took some code, and we have another class that's kind of buried, not a lot of people know about it, for using GDI Plus to resize images, right? Mm-hmm. And so my idea is, well, let's try to surface things that are harder to find or take some code, and it's like a library, but common things, and you just wrap them in this my. So take a look at, if I open up this images class, we can right-click on this class, and notice there's a custom builder for these guys, and all you do is put in your namespace that you want, and what methods and properties you want to expose in the my.IntelliSense. You can put in your own tooltips and everything. So, for example, just for fun, I'll hang another one off the multimedia, and I'll just say new class, and I'll just call it Scoble, right?
Yep.
And I'll just create a new property for fun, and I'll call it RSS, and I'm just going to have it return a string is cool, right? I'll just put RSS as just a string. It could be a method, all that. And then I close that, and actually what I can do is register it. I'll go back into the class and say builder. And notice you can turn on and off what method you want to expose, but let's put this one under multimedia.
Okay.
Is that spelled right? Yeah. Close it. And now I'll close this. And I'll go back in here and say print my.multimedia.scobble.rss. And I'll run it. And there it is. Is that neat? But the cool part, really, in this case, is showing you the extensibility and how easy it is to hook in your own, or tool builders to hook stuff in. Well, what I did is created two things. One is to fire off a file in the shell so I can run it, and the other one is to resize. So let me show you this little demo that kind of shows the power of the my functionality. If I say something like mycomputer.shellexecute, and I have a file on here called fox.bmp. It's a photo I took with my digital camera a couple of months ago. And actually I don't need the print here. It's just going to run it. It's just a method. And then, so it's going to fire off and display it. And then just so you can see it, I'm going to do a message box, and I'll just say pause. That way I don't continue running the program. And then I'm going to say my dot, and this is the new one that I created, images.resize, right? and I'll just put in the file name that I want here as the source, right? And I'll say c:temp fox.jpg is the output. And the idea here is we're going to resize it with a factor. Let's put in 0.25. We'll make it a fourth the size. I think the current one is like 640 by 480, right? And then I want to run this again. I could easily use the my again, but I'm just going to output the JPEG. And that's it. But you see, that's all the code I did. It just wrapped it up nice and neat. So now watch when I run it. That's a picture I took of a wild fox out the car window when I was visiting San Juan Island recently, which is kind of ironic because we have a lot of things around here that resemble the fox.
Yep.
Then I close this, and now it says pause. Now watch, it's going to run that code, and oops, I have some kind of error. Oh, there, I have a typo. I have a string there. Let me just run it again, close it, and then there you go, fourth the size. Well, that's a common thing a programmer might do, whether they have images in their database application. They might put the data in some kind of memo field or whatever. But does that give you an idea of the my and how you can extend it?
Absolutely.
I just put in that functionality this afternoon, and so I'm excited about all the things we can add later. So let me close this
Features
out.
being added to FoxPro as we want.
That's how we work here. Yeah. So I have a funny thing with the resolution. Watch when I reset this once, and it will this is a trick to virtual PC. Somehow you Alt Tab, and if I go back to the setting.
We'll talk to the virtual PC team about that.
Well, it's just a funny thing when I go in the full screen, and it only does that when I'm in dual monitor mode. Okay, so here I am.
All right.
And this next part of the demos is all about interoperability. One of our focuses is there's so many things in Visual Studio that you can do on top of the .NET Framework 2.0 that aren't in FoxPro, and we want to start surfacing up those things. So what I'm going to do is show you some demos that basically have the two working together really well.
Okay.
The first one is about web services. So ASP.NET is a great platform for building XML web services. This is like one of those hello world ones, right? Where you just have a method called hello world, takes a parameter and returns it with a string. Now what I'm going to do is, just for people that aren't familiar with like ASP.NET or Visual Studio programming, that's the code right here. And I hit F5, which does a debug, and when it's a web service, it gives you this nice little template web page that you can test it. And I'll just say, this is a test, and it'll actually call the web service, return the XML that you would normally get. Notice, it's a simple web service, but this could obviously go into like, a FedEx or some other type of web service or another application running another platform.
Yeah.
And you're communicating. So more and more things are going to happen where web services are needed, especially in FoxPro we want to call out to another component. So let me load in FoxPro here. Here's version FoxPro 9. And I have this little sample that I'm going to show you. And I'll just hit run. I'll close this out. Now let me go into the Designer, and I can show you a couple of pieces of code. There's a button here. When I click it, it runs the SOAP Toolkit 3.0. It's something we ship in Visual FoxPro 8 and 9, and it's a COM-based wrapper around calling web services. Now, even though if you have FoxPro, this is supported, Microsoft's not going to be adding features. The functionality is deprecated because everything's going in the .NET platform. So this function works, but as WSDL SOAP gets more complex or you get more features like Indigo and all that, you're kind of stuck unless you use the .NET framework. So take a look at this button, and what I did here is create a wrapper. So the web service is actually called in .NET, and all you do is launch it. Okay?
Go for it.
So watch when I run this form, and I click this web service. Notice it returns the function. It just passed the value. And then this does the same thing. So the key is the result is the same. There's no difference between the parameter gets passed and the return value here.
Yep.
The first one uses the SOAP toolkit. The second one uses the .NET framework. The power here is, as Indigo gets more mature and other functionality, security, reliability, all that, we're going to allow FoxPro to use the framework rather than the SOAP toolkit. This is just one simple example. Another example that's on the same theme, in a sense, is XSLT, or doing things with XML. We have the MS-XML parser that comes with IE and so forth, and it's a COM object. And if I look at this code here, I have an XSLT file that comes with FoxPro 9 for creating HTML from report XML. And this XML came from a report, like a 10-page report or something. And notice I'm using some code. Anybody that's programmed with XML would be familiar with this. You create DOM, you parse it in. You parse in the XSLT and you transform it. In this case, I wrote like a 5-line VB.NET program that does this transform using system.xml. The nice thing about .NET Framework 2.0 is that XSLT gets compiled into IL. I think I mentioned that in that XML Tools Channel 9 video.
Yep.
And it can run much faster. And so here, I'm just going to do the exact same things where in one case, I compile and create XML from XSLT. It's actually an HTML file. And the other one from the COM object, one from .NET. And so you run this one, and there's the HTML output. And then the next one will run, and then there's using .NET. You get the same output, but in a lot of cases it could be faster, or there could be other particular functionality you need. So it's just showing how you can surface functionality from the .NET framework and not have to be relying on COM objects that aren't necessarily being enhanced or have lacking functionality. Okay?
Yep.
So those are pretty much independent. Let me close this project that I showed you a minute ago. And let me jump into this next little demo. And that is, you're familiar with Northwind?
Oh, yeah.
Northwind's been around for a long time, right? Whether it's
Yeah,
SQL Server
since,
Access or FoxPro.
Since Access 1.0 days.
So what we did a few versions ago is replicated the Northwind database in FoxPro. Okay, so you can come in here and say browse, and you can right-click and say modify and all that, right?
Yep.
And so there's the data. And then in this case, what we did is created a couple of PRG programs that are little wrappers that say OLE public, which makes a DLL.
Okay.
So when we're talking about interop and having like .NET call into FoxPro for business rules or data access, you need a DLL. And they're really easy to do. You just create a class and say OLE public, and you build your project, and it's done. And this code uses the new XML adapter component that has things like update order, where you pass it XML and you fetch the data saying get orders by. And this is compatible with ADO.NET. So the simple business object here is I want to give you a customer ID, and you're going to give me back XML that represents the orders. Could be a one-to-many in one XML document. And then I'm going to do something with it. And it's compatible with ADO.NET. Then I can make changes to it, like in a data set or a grid or a form. And whatever changes get made in either FoxPro or in .NET with ADO.NET, you can say, give me a diffgram. Just show me the changes. Another XML document. And then you send it back. And either ADO.NET knows how to update it or FoxPro knows how to update it. So this is how we're going to do this transport. It's about disconnected data and interoperability. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to webify this sucker. So if I go into this web application, I think it's this one here. So this is a ASP.NET project that happens to be using VB.NET code. And let me just let it come up here, and we'll hit Design Service. And there's a lot of developers who want to so-called webify their app. That doesn't mean they want to put the entire application on the web, but you might want certain components of it, whether it's in the intranet or the internet. And it's still just loading up the server thing. So notice it's like a regular form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some code behind it that just calls the FoxPro business object wrapper and fetches the XML. Once the XML comes back into ADO.NET, there's no difference in programming as if you were connected to SQL Server or some other data source. So it's a couple lines of code to get the XML from the FoxPro DLL. You just add a reference, okay? And then you go ahead and let's hit F5 while it's bringing it up. And what it's going to do here is just run the page. It actually, when I type in clean, that's a particular ID, it's going to go out to that customer and it fetched all these orders. And so the FoxPro DLL got called, one XML document came out and back and it's data bound. If we click here, we fire up another ASP.NET page, and notice it actually drills in. And I can just change like this to like region SP2. Now when I hit update, what it does here is it actually takes that diffgram, sends it back to the FoxPro DLL, and it actually updated the FoxPro database real time. And so there's like a web version of that. So let me close this out here. And just let that close. I'm going to go back into FoxPro. Now, I did the same thing with, let me see here, with .NET WinForm. There's a lot of situations where you do more data entry. You might not want it for the web, or you might have to combine both. And actually, let me fire up the right project, so I'm on track here. Here we go. So if I hit run, and I'm just gonna, this is just a launcher, but I'm just showing it from running FoxPro. So when we click here, notice I'm in FoxPro and I just ran this form. And I'm going to type in Queen, okay, and so it's doing the same thing.
Yep.
But one thing that a Fox developer would realize is, oh, look, there's menus on a form. You don't really do that in FoxPro. This is a VB.NET Win form that I called from Fox, okay? And it's showing you how you could either use FoxPro to fire off .NET Win forms,
Yep.
or you might have FoxPro as a middle tier only in this case, and you're putting a .NET client on the top of it. So let's go in and notice there's SP2. Didn't I just change that?
Yep.
Let's just change it to 3, and I hit save. This one has a nice message box that comes back. I hit close, and that actually updated the data.
Yep.
And that's all.
We want to see that Avalon one, since you have that Avalon.
Oh, yeah. Now, I didn't create one. I'm just playing with the Avalon, but I'll show you something cool about this. This Avalon form, you're going to go, oh, this doesn't look like a data entry form. This is some sample that I found. But the point is, I'm firing it off from FoxPro.
Oh, okay.
And you're running it. And it's just a cool thing. If you want to describe in 30 seconds what Avalon form is?
No, they can go watch the video.
Go to the channel.
We have an hour-long video.
Avalon will run on a Windows XP platform, and it will also, of course, is designed for Longhorn. But the whole idea is it's...
I bet when I come back in a month, you're going to have a nice form.
Well, watch this.
3D
what I have, sometimes for demos, I put in these little hidden things. So I'm going to right-click on this button, right?
Yeah.
And I open up XAML. I found a sample that has some XAML, right? It's a different form than you just saw. And see where it has, and I'm just going to fire it off first so you can see it. And here's this little app, right?
Yeah.
And notice where it says email. Well, I'm going to close this. I'm going to right-click again. I'm just going to say email, and I'll say global, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to hit Control-W, and I just saved the XAML form, and I wrote a little program that automatically rebuilds the Avalon project.
Oh, cool.
And fires it off, right?
Cool.
So... let me just click here.
Now that
and
doesn't
there
have
it is.
anything to do with FoxPro, right?
Well, I'm using FoxPro to create XAML to run an Avalon project. So now I can have data from that app come in. See what I mean?
Yeah.
The power of creating XAML on the fly dynamically and then running it is huge.
Very cool.
Think of all the cool demos that have been done just statically with a designer or XML. Now think of an app controlling the source to your whole view. Whether it's integrating data. So the power is huge, right? So notice this little project is kind of, there's one cool thing about this little demo. When you pick a name and you hit create report, and you can say add an expense. This is all Avalon. And I like to put in an expense called gambling. And I come over here and I say, well, the item is slots. Right?
Yep.
And notice there's the item. Well, I'll type in 120 and look at that little chart down there. What's really wild is as I type, it changes that. That's the coolness of the Avalon output. Then I can click here, and of course, and then show it. But then, of course, another goal would be to take this data that resulted and like pass it back to FoxPro or something, so that you're integrating an Avalon UI with a FoxPro application.
Wow.
So
that's really cool stuff.
Okay.
And there's more?
And there is, I think, one more.
All right.
One more thing to show you.
You always have a Swiss Army knife full of demos.
Now, take a look at this. Actually, there's two more things. One, they're both quick. One is this project here. Yep. Have you heard much or read much about Click Once?
Oh, yeah.
Click Once is this idea
tell us again.
that in Visual Studio 2005 that you deploy your application, and it's an easy way of packaging up a manifest, and it lets you go deploy it. So when you make updates and the user tries to run it, it automatically detects when there's updates.
Yep.
More like a professional application.
Yep.
See this little VB form? I came in here and I added, remember that one business object for FoxPro?
Yep.
I added this guy here and wrote couple lines of code, and all that happens is it calls a certain ID, and then it populates the return value in this text box, which is XML in the case, right?
Got it.
Just showing you how you can call this DLL. But the important part is we go to this project, we go over to the properties, and we can go over to references.
Yep.
There's this really cool thing in Click Once called isolated for DLLs, for example.
Where are you looking?
I'm down here in the property sheet. When you
sorry.
add a deal like a FoxPro COM object,
Yep.
you can say isolated. What that means is when I come up to this project and I say, I debug and I say publish, and I hit here, and here's the Click Once. I can just basically hit finish and it goes and deploys your app. And it builds an exe and install.
So if I was using this, I would get an update
Yeah, well, it will create it and deploy it somewhere on a server, for example, and then automatically, if you had already installed it, would say there's a new version.
Yeah.
What's
We've
really
had a whole
cool
video
is
with the Click Once team that demos that.
right.
So.
The reg-free takes that COM object, puts it in your project, and when the user installs it, it doesn't register the DLL on your machine.
Oh, that's
it
really
keeps
cool.
it within the manifest. Then, if the user found an error, they can roll back to the previous version and it'll automatically use the other DLL. So your DLL is like encapsulated inside. There's no DLL hell. It's like inside the project. That's a big thing. And the message here is that you can basically take your FoxPro components and deploy them with Click Once, and there's a pretty powerful thing there. The last thing I'll show is something, a simple little scenario that it's partially done. But I figure, hey, it's fun to show this off now. I started thinking about how cool it is you can take XML and send it back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. So working on this demo where you say, well, I am a real estate agent or something or other, and I have a tablet PC, but I'm not connected, but I need to take some data with me. So notice I have 2 XML files here, right? Mm-hmm. And the Northwind XML is simply the result of querying a certain customer. And it's a static file. And the idea is we're going to have this little program where you pop this memory card, any memory card, USB, in the drive, and it's going to detect a file and say, oh, copy the latest one on there. And then you run this little program here called Tablet App, and it takes, and notice it's got a little app. Of course, the UI needs to be enhanced. And you could say, like, okay, SP5, and then you make some changes and you hit save.
Yep.
What it does is it updates this XML file, and what it'll say is, please insert the memory card, pop it in there, you bring it back to your home base, whatever,
yeah.
And it does the same thing the ASP.NET and the WinForm app does. It just simply sends that XML back to Fox and does your update.
Very
so
cool.
It's a completely transportable thing. The last thing to show you is I'm working on this output, so whenever someone changes an order, this is, Outlook, but I have my copy of NewsGator loaded on here, right? So if I go NewsGator, and if I say subscriptions, and I say add feed, and I say C:, and I put this in the temp directory, RSS, XML, and I hit OK, and I hit close, and notice what I'm having FoxPro do is just create some RSS that I subscribe to when orders change, so a manager can see when they're changing the orders.
Oh, that's awesome.
Is that neat? So the idea is, someone in the field did this, and then as soon as they plug it back in, and someone's reading blogs, but they also read when new houses are sold, and it's just through RSS.
That's awesome.
So that covers most.
So you're gonna tomorrow you're gonna write a podcasting client?
What I am working on is showing the same demo with a smartphone. With the little audio box.
Oh yeah.
Because Visual Studio 2005 has a cool emulator and code, and I want to deploy the same thing and do it on a smartphone. And of course, it'll be connected to the FoxPro database. But so just give you a good idea of interop.
This is awesome.
Notice that it's like, hey, these two things working together, you can go a long ways, kind of
what
thing.
Are those? You didn't show me those two.
Oh yeah, Visual FoxPro 9, and then of course the Visual Studio 2005 Beta 2.
Right.
I suspect people really like this packaging, so
yeah,
copied us.
They're going to email you now. How do I get the collector's edition?
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be like the Halo.
We need the behind the scenes, the deleted scenes. Yeah. Director commentary.
Hey, that's what Channel 9 is. All right. See you later, man. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
This is really cool stuff.